Welcome to State of the State. I'm Darlene DeRezzo, and I'm in conversation with Dr. Frederic Reamer. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we are pleased to welcome back Dr. Reamer. He is a professor in the Graduate School of Social Work at Rhode Island College, and he's here to talk to us about his new book, Artificial Intelligence in the Behavioral Health Professions, Ethical and Risk Management Issues. Welcome back.
Delighted to be here.
We are so happy you made it back. Let's start with maybe your career. So you have been at Rhode Island College for some 40 years.
Yeah, 42 if you're
42.
Being precise.
All right. What inspired you to go into social work, into to become a practitioner of the healing arts?
I'll be brief.
Okay.
I became a social worker decades ago, primarily to work in prisons. I've actually spent 27 years of my career working in federal and state prisons. When I was working in a federal prison in Illinois many years ago, I was working with an inmate who shared with me some information confidentially, air quotes, because there is no such thing as absolute confidentiality. As you know, there are some exceptions. And I had reason to believe that that inmate was going to assault another inmate. And I had to make a difficult ethical decision about whether to respect his privacy or disclose what he had shared with me to protect a third party from harm. And that led me down the ethics rabbit hole because I realized that at that time, there were very few guidelines in what we now call behavioral health to help practitioners make some really difficult decisions around confidentiality exceptions and managing boundaries and dual relationships and conflicts of interest and a variety of other issues. And I've now spent much of my career not only working in prisons, but also focused on the development of conceptual frameworks to identify challenging ethical issues, to manage them skillfully, and most recently, today's topic, artificial intelligence.
Yeah, what brought you to artificial intelligence?
Well, you know, when I started my career, I could not have imagined that I'd be sitting here with you talking about this topic because nobody had ever heard those two words put together. Artificial, yeah, like anybody have any artificial sweetener for their coffee, and intelligence, like that's a good quality to have as a behavioral health professional, but nobody linked the two terms. And I have been spending a number of years now developing ethics-related guidelines for practitioners' use of technology to provide services remotely, which of course during the height of the pandemic became essential, to exchange text messages with clients and patients and email messages and in some instances online social networking communications. And about 2 years ago, artificial intelligence started to emerge as a very prominent feature in the human services generally, in behavioral health more specifically. And I realized as somebody who spends a lot of time thinking about ethics, in part, I chaired the national task force that wrote the Code of Ethics for the social work profession, and realized we need to develop ethics-informed guidelines for the use of artificial intelligence. So I had to learn a lot really fast, and hence the book.
So that term was first coined in the 50s, correct?
Correct.
And what does it mean? Let's define our terms. What does that mean?
Artificial intelligence basically combines computer science with human judgment. And we use a lot of jargon, machine learning, natural language processing, and it's basically using computer software to simulate human thinking, human conversation, human insight, human intelligence. And it's being used in behavioral health in a wide variety of ways.
Okay, how so? So why don't we, do you want to dive into that?
Sure.
Okay. Well, where shall we start then? Chat box. You tell me where we should begin with this.
So,
yeah, it's overwhelming.
Artificial intelligence is being used in behavioral health in a variety of ways, and not just a little bit.
A lot.
It is increasing dramatically. So, chatbots, you mentioned. Individuals who, for example, wake up at 2:37 a.m. having a panic attack, and they can't reach a therapist, and they don't know what to do. They may even have suicidal thoughts, and they want to connect with a resource. There are a number of chatbots out there. If we were sitting in front of a computer, I could show you a dozen different chatbots that individuals can access, and they can ask for information about how to deal with a panic attack. There are artificial intelligence tools that will provide other resources for people who are in crisis. There are artificial intelligence tools that we can use to monitor clients and patients. They can use wearable sensors, and they can provide information to their clinicians about their thoughts, their feelings, and it's all generated by AI. And so the therapist can monitor how a client is doing. AI is being used to surveil clients in some
Well,
settings.
my next question was sort of, well, how much do we want to know about what our clients are doing all day, every day, thoughts, feelings, right, whatnot. So what's the difference between I'm not feeling well, I'm having a panic attack, I'm in distress, I'm going to go to the emergency room, right, or call the many states have a behavioral health emergency system that's separate from 911, right? So why would someone not go there first? Or would they mistakenly go online looking for, say, the local behavioral health clinic or emergency access, risk management, and then end up with a chatbot?
It's not likely, if they were going to try to access a behavioral health clinic, it's not likely they're going to be connected with a chatbot. These chatbots that are available for therapeutic purposes, that is how they are marketed, are typically independent of crisis centers, mental health centers, psychiatric hospitals, outpatient clinics. And so at 2:37 a.m., somebody might decide, I want help. I don't really want to get up and go to an emergency department. It's inconvenient. Maybe they're afraid. Some people prefer to be anonymous. One of the advantages in some people's minds, there's a downside to it, of course. One of the advantages of these chatbots is they are largely anonymous. So if somebody wants help and doesn't want to disclose who they are, they can use a chatbot and not have to go talk to a human being at a hospital. Some people prefer that, right? And so it's appealing to some people in a lot of respects, but there's also a downside, of course. So for instance, if somebody is engaging in suicidal thoughts in the middle of the night, and they're sharing that with a chatbot anonymously, the chatbot is not in a position to contact 911 to have somebody check out this person. So there are a lot of trade-offs here.
Right.
But for privacy reasons, convenience reasons, and I'm not endorsing them necessarily, but that's what attracts a lot of people.
Okay, but there's so we miss clinical intuition and we miss co-regulation, right? Having our nervous systems talk to each other if we are a potential client or someone in distress engaging with a chatbot, correct? Who pays for this? So if someone is making an emergency visit, there's a billing code, right? Or an out-of-pocket fee, right? If you're talking to a chatbot, who pays for this? Is it like the advertising on the screen?
So it depends which one you're talking about.
Okay.
Some of them are created by nonprofits, so they're not looking to make money.
Okay.
Others are sponsored by for-profits, and they may provide some sort of entry-level AI services free, but if you want more ambitious therapeutic services, you pay. Insurance isn't paying for this, to my knowledge, and so some people are paying out of pocket. It's almost like a subscription to have access to this service.
Okay, so one downside you said then would be the surveillance, right? The lack of that human contact, the co-regulation. What other downsides are there to talking to a chatbot?
Well, and again, chatbot is one major feature, but there are lots of other ways in which AI is being used in behavioral health.
Okay.
But you asked about downsides. So I'm very concerned about potential privacy breaches. People are sharing a lot of personal information. That information is being stored in the cloud, typically. Now, I do think that by and large, these are pretty secure websites, so to speak, and cloud storage systems and all of that, but we've all heard stories about privacy breaches and HIPAA violations and so forth. So one concern I have is privacy breaches. Another concern I have is informed consent. And informed consent has been around for decades and decades and decades. I think we have a duty to explain to people who use these AI tools very clearly what the potential benefits are, and I do think there are potential benefits, and also what the potential risks are, the potential downside, that they're not talking to a human being. I was in Japan teaching. I visited a nursing home that had a locked unit for older residents with psychiatric issues. And on that unit, there is a social robot, that's the terminology, a social robot, that mimics a human being. Some of them are life-size with clothing and a wig, and they engage with the residents. It's a psychiatric unit within the nursing home. So these are people with cognitive impairment, dementia, Alzheimer's. And I'm not sure they understand that they are communicating with a robot. And I will tell you, this robot is incredibly impressive. It actually remembers each individual resident's preferences, tastes in music, what kinds of jokes they like. If the resident gets an email message or a text message from an adult child, the robot offers to read it to the resident and provide a response. It's remarkable. But I am concerned about informed consent. Like, how do you consent to that when the person has cognitive impairment? I'm also concerned about possible errors. So another way in which AI is being used, as a clinician, you know that after you see a client, you record a summary of that clinical encounter. There are, I know of 7 different products on the market that will generate your note. You don't have to type anything. It's a remarkable time saver. The way it works is your client would consent to having the therapy session recorded, HIPAA-compliant software. The recording is then uploaded to the AI tool. The AI tool will then generate the clinical note. And I have read a lot of these notes, and I would say by and large, they're remarkably accurate.
But too accurate?
And sometimes there are errors.
Okay.
And sometimes too accurate.
And too, yeah.
In this sense.
Yeah.
A good clinician knows that he or she sometimes has to edit details in a note. That there are some very private, sensitive details that a client shared that should not be in that note, because third parties can get access to that note. Notes can be subpoenaed. And so instead of putting in the note, for example, this is based on a real case, that a client disclosed to you, the therapist, that he committed a very serious crime several years ago, and he's feeling guilt and remorse, and that's what he wants to talk about. A good therapist is going to think about whether to actually reference that note, the crime rather, reference the crime in the note, for which the client may not have been charged or arrested or sentenced. It's confidential. You might put in your note, client disclosed details about a past traumatic event to protect the client's privacy, not to minimize the seriousness of a crime. But AI cannot make that distinction.
Right.
AI is going to put in that note exactly what the client said about the murder, the armed robbery, the sexual assault, the child molestation, whatever it is. And it may not be edited out if that clinician doesn't proofread and edit very carefully. And those are the kinds of mistakes and problems I am seeing.
Right. So as clinicians, if we're doing something called concurrent documentation, right, the client knows exactly what's going into the note. They can sort of look at it.
Offer feedback.
Yeah. So the client would not necessarily know what was going in.
Exactly.
Unless we're going to review it the next session once edits are made, and that can be very time consuming and
it also may be too late, because that note needs to be entered within, depending upon where you work or private practice, within 24 hours, 48 hours. But if you're seeing the client next Tuesday, that's too late. That note needs to be in there. Particularly if, hypothetically, if the clinician is out sick or on vacation, somebody else is covering. If that note isn't in there that references, let's say, suicidal ideation because you waited, that's a huge malpractice risk. There are, right now, public child welfare agencies that are using AI. So you're a mandated reporter.
That's in your book, right? Did you have an example in that book?
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
Do you want to talk about that?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. So as one example, it's not pervasive yet, but I suspect it'll grow in popularity. So you're a mandated reporter. If you have a client who discloses to you confidentially, air quotes, that the client abused a child, an older adult, neglected a child, older adult, by law, you're obligated to report that. That's a difficult decision, but by law, you're obligated to. There are some public child welfare agencies that are now using artificial intelligence to screen your call. So if you call that in and you leave a message, or it's recorded because it's on a recorded line, there are public child welfare agencies in Rhode Island like DCYF, although they're not using it to my knowledge, that will review your report using AI and decide whether to send an investigator out. Is this high risk, moderate risk, low risk, that kind of thing. And a human being may not make that initial judgment. Now, a human being may double check it, but there are departments using AI to screen those calls in some very risky situations.
So in order to screen the call, information has to go in to the system to then make a decision in the future as to what's high importance, medium.
And the way it works is the call was recorded, so it gets uploaded to the AI tool, just like the recording of a therapy session would be uploaded to an AI tool. There are...
Let me ask you this. So records can be destroyed after 7 years?
Depends. So there's no, it depends.
Oh, okay.
Because your therapists are covered by different laws, federal, state. It depends whether the client was a minor.
It's a minor, they need to turn 18, and then I believe it's 7 years after that.
Well, yeah, it's tricky because you may have insurance contracts that require you to keep those records longer.
Got it.
If you're funded by Medicare, they have a different. Anyway,
Okay.
But let's pick 7 years as an example.
Okay. What happens to records up in the cloud, notes up in the cloud?
They're probably there forever.
Wow.
Right? And well, the good news is you didn't have to put them in a filing cabinet. You know, you didn't have to have paper records. Okay. But until that AI company goes out of business, that note is in the cloud. You know, when I started my career, the cloud was the white fluffy thing in the sky, full stop. Now it's where you store AI-generated notes and chatbot communications.
So that might be nerve-wracking to a client,
Absolutely.
right? It just, your record just never gets destroyed. And at any point, someone could intercept that record.
In theory, you know, do I think there's a great likelihood that there would be a privacy breach and that record stored in the cloud would be accessed by a third party without authorization? I don't think it's a tremendous risk, but I don't think it's zero risk.
Okay. All right, so we talked about chatbots, social robots. Tell me about search engines.
Sure.
What do we need to know about that in AI?
Sure. So, you know, ask the average person on the street about internet-based search engines, and they're going to mention Google. They might mention Bing, that's Microsoft's version. They might mention one of my favorites. It's called DuckDuckGo. That's not a joke. That's a real powerful search engine. But when it comes to AI, there are other remarkably powerful tools. So most people have heard of ChatGPT, but that's only one. There are others that I think are incredibly impressive.
Would you pause there and explain ChatGPT?
Sure.
No, GPT. What was it?
ChatGPT.
Okay, yes.
So ChatGPT, and there are other products like that. I can rattle off the names. There's one called Perplexity. There's one called Claude, C-L-A-U-D-E. There's one called Poe, P-O-E. There is one called GoPilot. There's one called DeepSeek. I mean, there are a bunch of these. And the way they work is you, as a therapist, might put in a summary or a list of symptoms that a client has reported to you. And you might ask the AI tool, any of those products that I just mentioned, to please take a look at those symptoms and speculate about possible diagnoses.
Oh, that's interesting.
And you ask ChatGPT or Claude or Copilot or Perplexity or any of the others, based on these symptoms, what treatment goals and plans would you recommend?
Okay.
Oh, I've done it many times.
Yeah.
Absolutely easy to do. So you are putting in a request and asking the the AI tool to use what's called machine learning to provide you with information. You could say, please generate a summary of best practices in mental health counseling for the treatment of co-occurring issues. Somebody struggles with substance use and depression. My client is a 32-year-old male. Please survey the literature and summarize best practices. And it'll give you a summary of, for example, what the research says about the effectiveness of cognitive behavioral therapy, or dialectical behavior therapy, or narrative therapy, or different psychotropic medications. It's an incredibly powerful tool. And I will tell you, as someone who does a lot of consultation around the United States and sometimes abroad on really challenging ethical issues, really difficult ones, I have experimented with AI, with the tools that I just mentioned. I will generate a reasonably detailed summary of the complicated case, and I will ask the tool to analyze it and to recommend possible ways to manage that ethical challenge, to protect the client and the practitioner, to try to prevent a lawsuit and a licensing board complaint. And I am really impressed. It doesn't tell you what to do, but it can really help you think it through. And I mean within seconds, not minutes, seconds. Here's another remarkable example of AI. So I've done a lot of research on this. And I did it this very morning. I was giving a national lecture this morning, and I was providing an overview of some of these issues. And I said to the audience, they're all over the United States, I said, so I want you to listen to two individuals who are discussing the current state of the art with regard to these issues, ethical and risk management issues associated with the use of artificial intelligence. Listen to these two people discussing these issues, and they're going to summarize my research. So then I click on play, and it's about a 15-minute conversation between these two individuals, and I played just a couple of minutes of it, and then I stop it, and I ask people, so do you get a sense that this is a pretty succinct summary of what I've been talking about? Yes, yes, yes. I said, well, what you just heard, those were not human beings. And the look on people's faces. I said, what you just heard, and this is a conversation that sounds like what you and I are doing right now, with that inflection, the intonation, some hesitation, a couple of jokes. That's what they heard. Completely generated by artificial intelligence. They were blown away. And I told them, I created that AI conversation. It took me about 3 minutes. And I said, this is an example of how powerful AI is. And those two people, air quotes, because they were not real people, but they sound like real people, they did a great job. So it's both impressive and I would argue a little creepy.
Yeah. We are coming close to 5 minutes. Do you want to talk about the biases and unfairness?
Sure.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Sure.
Unless there's something else. Okay.
So a couple of other concerns I have. One is, particularly in the mental health world, behavioral health world, so many clinicians now, and I think an increasing number, are using AI to try to diagnose. Well, the way AI works is, if you put in a list of symptoms, what the client's reporting, it is going to survey literature on the treatment of, to use the example I provided earlier, best practices, co-occurring issues, adult male, age, whatever. And the studies, so AI is going to look at studies. Studies have samples. Samples have people. The samples may be populated largely by, could be college students, or could be middle income, upper income people who have private health insurance, who got into that sample to generate those results. But if you're working in a setting mostly with low income people, people of color, people who identify not as heterosexual but LGBTQ+, the information on which the AI tool is basing its recommendations may not reflect your client population. So that's a risk of what we call misdiagnosis, right? Then there's what's called algorithmic bias. It's related. So you could get AI recommending treatment plans, diagnoses, and all that, but those recommendations are based on populations and samples that are not a great fit for your clientele in your setting. So we're worried some about potential misdiagnosis and jargon, this so-called algorithmic bias, because AI depends on algorithms. And that's the terminology.
Okay.
And algorithms can generate some pretty biased results. And so we have to be critical consumers. You know, real quickly, people are fascinated by AI, understandably. And it's like the shiny new toy. And people are sometimes drawn to the shiny new toy and they want to start using it without reading the owner's manual carefully. Mm-hmm. And so I'm worried that behavioral health practitioners, therapists, are going to use AI because it's so powerful. It can save a lot of time without fully understanding the potential downsides that I discuss in this book.
Do you think that there will be an AI therapist, so
there
to speak?
Not maybe. There are.
But to meet with a client week after week?
There are.
Week after week?
There are.
Okay, so we know a lot about co-regulation, attachment, becoming the attachment figure that the client didn't have, et cetera. I mean, how can AI therapy be effective in the same way it can be with a human?
Right, and that is a genuine concern.
Okay.
Can you replace the human being therapist who can look at eye contact, look at body language, look at the nonverbal cues? AI can't pick up on that stuff easily. And so I think it's a genuine concern. But this is not if it's happening, it's happening. And I think that is one of the potential downsides, that some people are going to opt for that. They don't want to drive to a therapist's office. They don't want to pay for a therapist. They find this appealing. And there are these potential downsides that I think we have to be very concerned about. And that gets back to informed consent. We have to truly explain transparently what the potential benefits and risks are. I
wonder what modalities the AI therapist would be proficient in delivering. Like, could they do EMDR, sand tray, play therapy?
So, EMDR, sand tray, I don't think so, at least to my knowledge. But I've seen some of these AI tools that are really good at drawing on cognitive behavioral therapy principles and guidelines and dialectical behavior. They actually use this, and they have conversations with people.
Wow. We have a minute. Any last words, Dr. Reamer?
I didn't see any of this coming at the beginning of my career. Could not have imagined it. But we're here. We've rung this bell. I don't know how to unring a bell.
Okay.
We've cracked the egg. I don't know how to get a yolk back in the eggshell. Not possible. So I think our responsibility is to be very honest about the potential advantages, the potential downsides, to keep researching the ways in which these AI tools are being used, and this is going to evolve over time. We have got to keep our finger on the pulse.
Okay. Very good. Thank you so much for coming back to the show.
My pleasure.
I'm Darlene DeRezzo. Thank you for watching. Please check out Dr. Reamer's book. If you are a licensed practitioner of the healing arts, you can get 3 CEUs for reading the book, correct?
And answering a bunch of questions.
Thank you.